Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hey there, I'm Stephanie.
It's our history unit for the month of July. Yep, that's what it is, all right.
It is. But
and we're going to talk about... Indeed.
It's almost like a travel unit. You know?
Yeah. History is like traveling in a sense.
Love history.
Traveling, of course, is history in a sense, and history is traveling in a sense, etc. But yeah, in terms of history, we're going back to the ancient world, and we're going to talk about 7 wonders of the ancient world. I remember when I was a kid, I had the Book of Lists, it was called. It was a popular book back at that time. And in that book, they did have a list of the 7 natural wonders, or excuse me, the 7 wonders of the ancient world, which most don't exist anymore.
Only one.
Then there are like 7 wonders of the modern world.
Yeah, we can still see those.
And then there's also lists of like natural wonders of the world, etc. So we're going to focus today specifically on 7 ancient wonders, some amazing things that existed. And specifically, we're talking about ones in the Western world because that's where we're from.
Western civilization.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, at the time, people around Europe there didn't really know about things outside of Europe there. Maybe they still don't. But at the time, though, they had this idea of these 7 great things that existed in the world. And they were mostly in Egypt and Greece and places like that. So that's what we're going to talk about in our program today.
Okay, let's read through day 1. The ancient civilizations of the West inspire awe when we look at all they created. These societies made great strides in architecture, constructing the marvels that we now call the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Great Pyramid of Giza. The only ancient wonder still standing today is also the oldest. Built as a tomb for the Egyptian pharaoh Khufu around 2500 BC. The Great Pyramid originally stood at 146.5 meters tall, though it has since shrunk 8 meters due to erosion. Scholars still debate how it was constructed, but they know it probably wasn't slaves or aliens who were responsible for this grand undertaking. Hanging Gardens of Babylon. It isn't certain whether this wonder really existed, but if so, it would have been an achievement of ancient engineering. Keeping lush gardens alive in the desert of modern-day Iraq likely required a sophisticated irrigation system, which forced water to flow uphill at certain points. Temple of Artemis at Ephesus. This splendid temple, in what's now Turkey, was built entirely of white marble and decorated with carvings and statues, including an impressive statue of the goddess Artemis. That said, its existence was difficult. The temple was rebuilt several times after destruction by flood, fire, and war. Very little of it remains today, though fragments are kept in the British Museum. Statue of Zeus at Olympia. The site of the first Olympic Games once housed a 12-meter statue of the king of the ancient Greek gods. The statue and its throne were decorated with gold and ivory, and Zeus was so large that he barely fit inside his temple. Sadly, the statue was likely either destroyed in Olympia or was lost in a fire after being moved to another city.
Okay, now notice our title today is A Wander Through the 7 Ancient Wonders. So we've got the word wander.
It's cute.
And we've got the word wonder here. That might be difficult for non-native speakers to differentiate. You probably can't tell the difference between those 2 words. To wander just means to kind of walk around. You don't really have a goal. You could wander through the city on a Saturday, for example, and just have some fun.
It's similar to roam.
Exactly. And a wonder here, of course, is just something that is really amazing. So we're wandering through these ancient wonders. I wonder what we're going to talk about today when we wander through these ancient wonders.
Yeah, something pretty spectacular can be called a wonder. Now, the ancient civilizations of the West inspire awe when we look at all they created. It's true. I look back at history and I think, wow, how did they do that? How was that accomplished? There are some sites around the world where we still don't understand how they were constructed because they didn't have modern equipment like we do today. And we think, wow, those stones are so heavy. How did they do this? So we're talking about some ancient civilizations. Usually when you use that word ancient, it's at a time when there wasn't paper or the printing press hadn't been invented. So people weren't able to keep records except on stone and maybe even metal plates. I know that they would use gold and silver plates to make records. Now here, a civilization just refers to a society, and it includes the people, their culture, their way of life in a particular area. And we're talking about the West rather than the East in this particular unit. And awe, if something inspires awe in you, wow, you just have a lot of respect for it. You're pretty amazed at what you're seeing. Wow, awe. When you say the word, your jaw kind of drops open like, wow, awe. I'm in awe of your talent. I've said that to people before. If you see a great move in a sports game and you can't believe that guy caught the ball, you might be in awe of his skills. So just very respectful of someone's talent or what they've done. And you're just kind of filled with that wonder Tom talked about.
Yeah, awe, or something is awesome. And of course, these are things from the ancient civilizations of the West, from Egypt or from Greece or Rome, etc., etc. And these societies made great strides in architecture, constructing the marvels that we now call the seven wonders of the ancient world. So yes, these societies in the past made great strides in architecture. Stride, of course, is when you walk, when you make a step forward. So making great strides means having great improvement. So yes, they had some great improvement in architecture, which is the science of building things, especially buildings or structures. And of course, because they made great strides in architecture, they had great improvements in architecture, they were able to build or construct these marvels. A marvel, of course, is something that is marvelous. So yeah, we've got these seven wonders of the ancient world that we're describing as marvels.
Right. It's pretty cool if you see these things. You guys all follow, a lot of you follow the Marvel comics, right? And the superhero movies. It was named Marvel Comics because these superheroes have amazing skills, right? You're kind of in awe at the things they can do. Now, let's take a look at the first of the seven ancient wonders. It's the Great Pyramid of Giza. Now, this is the only ancient wonder still standing today, but what's so surprising is it's also the oldest. You would think the oldest would be the first to be destroyed, but no, this one is still standing today. You can go and see it. It was built as a tomb. A tomb is where a body, the body of a person who has passed away, who has died, is buried. So it was built as a tomb for someone pretty important. Back then, instead of kings in some places, they had what we called pharaohs. So the pharaoh was very important. And this was an Egyptian pharaoh from Egypt. His name is Khufu, and he lived around 2500 BC. So this was a long, long time ago. The Great Pyramid stood, originally, it was 146.5 meters tall. But like a lot of people, as they get older, they shrink a little bit. Their height diminishes or decreases. So this particular pyramid is actually shorter than it used to be. And why? Well, it's due to erosion. Erosion happens when something has to endure a lot of wind and rain and just use. That's erosion. It little by little kind of shrinks or disappears through erosion. Like the Queen's Head in Geelong, right? We've lost a lot of the neck of the Queen through wind and sea erosion.
Right. Over time, at least in terms of this pyramid, the wind has blown and gradually over hundreds of years, little pieces of dust get blown away. And as a result, it's not as tall as it used to be, but it's still there. And scholars still debate how it was constructed, but they know it probably wasn't slaves or aliens who were responsible for this grand undertaking. Yeah, I know what they're referring to there. When I was a kid, I remember reading a magazine that suggested, they could not possibly have built that using human labor. It must have relied on aliens. They must have had these spacemen coming with their spaceships and moving these big blocks of rock to build the pyramids. But most scholars think, nah, that's kind of silly. It's ridiculous. And scholars also don't think that the pyramids were built by slaves either. Yeah, slaves or aliens were not responsible for this grand undertaking. An undertaking is just a big project, something that takes a lot of effort and time to finish.
It's being used here as a noun, guys, but it's also a verb to undertake a big task or a big project. So if it's an undertaking as a noun, it's a big task or project or process that someone is going through. So yeah, to undertake. Maybe you've been asked to undertake the development of a new product for your company. That's a big undertaking. Grand here just means big. So our next 7 ancient wonders that we're talking about, the next on the list is the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Babylon is an ancient city that you often hear about if you're into Bible study, especially the Old Testament. It says here, it isn't certain whether this wonder really existed. So I guess we're kind of guessing through the records that have been left behind. We're kind of guessing as to what it would have looked like or what it, did look like. But it would have been an achievement of ancient engineering. I know a lot of our listeners are engineering students. You could be studying mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, computer engineering, which is really popular too. It's that branch of science and technology. It's concerned with design and building and the use of engines, machines, and structures. And back then, they didn't have a lot of modern technology. So it would have been pretty amazing to have this kind of garden. We're going to talk more about this garden, though, after our break, because we want to have enough time to talk about what an amazing feat it would have been to have this particular hanging garden. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after our Chinese teacher.
听众朋友大家好，我是安娜。我们今天跟明天要带大家回到古代世界，看看神秘的古代世界的7大奇景哦。好，那当然呢，我们知道这个西方的古文明其实创造了很多东西，可是如果我们真的仔细去看，我们就会有一种敬畏之情。那么当然这些社会在建筑风格上有很多的进步，也建造了我们现在称为古代的世界7大奇景这种奇迹。好，那我们接下来就看第一个咯 Giza 金字塔。其实 Giza 金字塔是到现在目前为止唯一一个仍然屹立而且最古老的一个古代奇景。不过在这句话当中呢，也就是 Giza 大金字塔这一段的第一句，我们看到一个关系子句，也是限定用法，但是它简化咯。先行词是 the only ancient wonder， 那么先行词当中有 only 这个强调字眼，后面所谓的冠带一定会用 that， 可是它的简化其实是把 be 动词的 is 也同时删掉了，所以看到的是 still standing today， 这3个字可以左右括号起来。好，那么这个大金字塔呢， 是建于西元前大概差不多2500年左右，当时是埃及法老古夫的陵墓。不过在这句话当中有一个分词构句哦，我们看到第二句一开始是一个 PP built B-U-I-L-T， 如果莫名其妙看到 PP 的话呢，我们会知道这个被动它的主词一定会出现在句子逗点之后 The Great Pyramid， 所以言下之意是 The Great Pyramid was built。 好，我们把主词跟 be 动词都删掉，那连接词到底在哪里呢？其实就在句子当中逗点之后 and，原本有个连接词把它删掉了，因为逗点前后没有什么特别强调或者是的这个很奇怪的语义逻辑关系，所以就直接把 and 删掉了。好，那么在这个分词构句特别注意，不过接下来我们看一下最后面，那么它当时呢是有 146.5 公尺高，不过因为侵蚀的关系就缩小了8公尺。那么目前学者还是在争论它到底是怎么建造的，但是呢他们知道负责这一项工程应该不是奴隶哦，也不太是外星人。后面我们来看一下最后面的who到句尾，特别注意一下哦，这里这一句话其实是一个强调的句子，在最后第3句的地方It was 可以把它框起来，如果我们把它 It was 遮掉的话，跟后面的 who 也遮掉，其实它是一个强调句，原本只是说他们知道不是奴隶或外星人所做的，但是要强调根本不是 slaves， 也不是 aliens。 好，接下来我们看到的就是巴比伦的空中花园咯。不过巴比伦的空中花园目前还不是很确定这个奇景是不是真的存在，因为如果真的存在，可能真的是古代工程的一个很极致的成就。好，所以在这句话当中呢，这里的 it 是一个虚主词，而真主词会从 whether 一直到后面逗点的地方。不过特别小心哦，在这里其实是一个情状可能性，逗点之后 it would have been， 这里的 would 表示一种比较极小的可能性 would。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Okay, let's continue with our lesson. We're talking about 7 of the ancient wonders of the world. We're wandering through them and we're wondering what they're about. These indeed are ancient wonders of the world. 7 of them, that's the magic number. The first wonder of the ancient world that we talked about was the Great Pyramid of Giza, which is in Egypt. Maybe you've been there, it still exists. And the second one we started talking about before our break was the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. And we're not really sure if it actually existed, but it would have been an achievement of ancient engineering. Keeping lush gardens alive in the desert of modern-day Iraq likely required a sophisticated irrigation system which forced water to flow uphill at certain points. Okay, so yeah, it would have required a lot of great engineering if this place did exist, because it was in the middle of a desert. And I guess Babylonia was in present-day Iraq. And, of course, that's a Middle Eastern country with a lot of harsh weather. It's a desert there. So, yeah, if they wanted to keep these gardens alive there, they would have required a lot of water.
Yeah. We're calling it sophisticated because it's very complicated. It probably had a very high level of skill that was involved in producing this irrigation system. Irrigation is where you take water from usually from a lake or a place that has been dammed up to keep water in a certain place, and then you force it to go in different directions. We have an irrigation canal by the home where I was raised in Arizona. It's also a desert, and a lot of people were forced to use irrigation to keep their lawns, watered and have water to water the crops. There are a lot of orange trees that are planted where I grew up. So irrigation would have to have been used back then because, again, you're talking about a desert region where they don't get a lot of water to begin with. Okay, moving on, we've got the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus.
Okay, so what's that? Well, this splendid temple in what's now Turkey was built entirely of white marble and decorated with carvings and statues, including an impressive statue of the goddess Artemis. So this is a big temple that existed in a place that is now Turkey, and it was built completely, totally, 100% of white marble.
Sounds pretty.
We've got marble here in Taiwan, down there in Hualien there. And in addition to the marble there, it was also decorated with carvings and statues. You'll see that in temples here in Taiwan. They've got lots of carvings and statues. And in this particular temple of Artemis, it included an impressive statue of Artemis. Artemis was a goddess. And let's see, what was she? She was the goddess
She's the hunting goddess.
Of hunting, yes. And she was the daughter of Zeus. And she was also the sister of Apollo.
Yeah, she was pretty strong. Every time I see this name Artemis, though, I think of a character in a popular TV show when I was growing up, Wild Wild West. And Artemis was the name of a guy. So this particular goddess is definitely female, but she's very strong and she was a great hunter, or a huntress, as they sometimes refer to her. So she there's a statue of her inside this beautiful temple that used to exist. You can't go and see it now. I would love to have seen it. It says that its existence was difficult. You know, they built it the first time and then they had to rebuild it several times after its destruction. If something is destroyed, we talk about its destruction, where something caused so much damage that you could no longer use it, or it no longer existed. They'd have to, start again. It was destroyed by flood, lots of water, fire, and war, of course. We've had war since man started to exist on Earth. So, unfortunately, this was rebuilt several times, but today, little of it remains. Very little. But if you want to see some fragments or very, very small pieces, you can take a trip and you want to go to the British Museum where they have some of the fragments. What's a fragment, Tom?
A little piece of something that's left over. You might have a defrag program in your computer to get rid of little pieces of information that are just in the computer taking up space. So, yeah, fragments is a small part that has been broken off of something bigger. Fragments from this temple still exist, but you have to go to the British Museum in London to see them. And now we're going to talk about the statue of Zeus at Olympia. Now, the site of the first Olympic Games once housed a 12-meter statue of the king of the ancient Greek gods. Nowadays, we've got all sorts of really tall statues.
Yeah.
I think there's a tall statue down in Kaohsiung there. I don't know how tall it is, but that's Foguangshan. I think they've got a big statue of the Buddha there. But in this particular case, in Greece there, in ancient Greece, there was a statue of Zeus there, and it was 12 meters tall.
Wow.
I imagine that was pretty tall for the time.
I wanted to point out quickly on a pronunciation aspect here. House is somewhere where you live, but if it turns into a verb, guys, as it does in this first sentence, once housed a 12-meter statue, instead of an S sound, we use the Z sound, house, to house somebody. You can't say, I want to house you. That's wrong. So remember, if house is a verb, you pronounce it with a Z, house, to house something or to house someone. So the statue and its throne were decorated with gold and ivory. Ooh, very expensive materials that I'm sure people wanted to steal if they could. And Zeus was so large that he barely fit inside his temple. So it was a tight fit, you could say. Now, a throne is where a king or queen or some royalty sits. It's a nice chair that's been decorated with lots of jewels. If you want to see a throne for a modern-day queen, you might check out Queen Elizabeth's throne. She's the queen, of course, of the UK. So, yeah, they decorated it with beautiful things. It says, sadly, the statue was likely either destroyed in Olympia or was lost in a fire after being moved to another city. I can't imagine how many things we've lost or have been destroyed because of fire or earthquakes. We have a lot of earthquakes, too, that end up destroying things.
Absolutely. So, yeah, it was either destroyed in Olympia or was lost in a fire. And, of course, yeah, sometimes these things happen when you try to move something big to another city, they fall apart. Or you get religious extremists or something and they blow it up or they push it down. I think that happened in Afghanistan. There were some ancient Buddha carvings there that they considered to be sacrilegious and they blew them up.
So sad.
So, yeah, it just happens sometimes. These ancient structures just don't survive until the present day. But we've only talked about 3 of the ancient wonders of the world. We'll talk about some more in our next program. But before we say goodbye today, we'd like to hear from our Chinese teacher.
那么不过呢，在这个花园里面这个在茂密的花园，其实它现在是在伊拉克的沙漠当中啦。那如果真的有这个花园，就需要一套很精密的灌溉系统哦，才能够使水往上移动。接下来我们看到的第3个世界七大奇景呢，就是 Artemis 神庙。那这个神庙呢，是位于现在的土耳其，完全由白色的大理石来建造，而且呢，用雕像来装饰。不过这个 statue 这个雕像还包括一尊令人印象很深刻的 Artemis 女神像。不过虽然是这样子，它的存在还是很困难，即便是很坚硬的大理石雕像。为什么呢？因为这个庙宇在被洪水火灾、战争破坏之后，其实还是重建了好多次。好，我们刚刚有提到一个景馆，虽然是用大理石来雕像，好像很坚固的样子。这里有一个特别的片语，请画起来，在第2句最前面 That said 是尽管是之前所谈到的这个情况，或者我们常常会说尽管如此，虽然是那样。好，最后我们再来看一下第4个所谓的世界七大奇景，就是 Olympic Zeus 的神像，一个 statue。那么其实在第1届的奥林匹克运动会的举办地曾经收藏了一个差不多有12公尺那么高的古希腊诸神之像，也就是 Zeus 宙斯。在最后面这边第1句的地方，我们注意到动词的 house 本来是房子，如果当动词就有 place 放置的意思。不过因为呢这个宙斯这个雕像太庞大了，几乎都没有办法放到他的庙宇里面。在第2句的地方，我们看逗点之后有一个 so that 这个句型抓出来，如此的以至于表示一个结果。什么样的结果呢？ that 后面副词 barely 特别要抓出来，它是一个否定字咯，表示几乎不能。不过很遗憾的，这个雕像呢，在奥林匹亚的时候，在奥林匹亚那个地方可能就已经被摧毁了，或者呢已经被移到另外一个城市，但是还是在火灾当中遗失了。以上是我们今天的内容，明天继续收听哦。我是安娜，拜拜。
Okay, that's it for today, everybody. But hey, there are lots of ancient wonders of the world that still exist. Well, actually, just one. But hey, they were probably cool when they did exist. And we'll talk about those in our program next time. So please join us then. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Bye.
See ya.